Cheshvan, the bitterness of the month of Cheshvan, because there are no holidays. Others call it Ram Cheshvan, which is the opposite letters of Mar. Just switch them around, which means the high month of Cheshvan, because this is our opportunity to take everything we daven for during Tishrei and to put it into practice. So what could be higher than that we can take our more ethereal, theoretic prayers and plans for the year and actually put them into practice. We should all be blessed to be able to fulfill all of our dreams and all of our prayers. Tonight we're starting a new series. I called it, for lack of a better name, is Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Chassidut, because the idea is that we are going to be doing a series of mini classes on many different subjects in Kabbalah and Chassidut. We're not going to be following, let's say, like Parsha, or we just finished all of the holidays and the months, but we're going to be taking different, very interesting and foundational, fundamental ideas of Kabbalah and Chassidut and exploring them. And of course, as always, we will be quoting Rav Ginzburg very liberally. But I do want to acknowledge, I see that he's here, and I hope I will pronounce his last name correctly, David Dekun. I hope I got that name right. He wrote me an email with some suggestions of different things we could learn about, almost all of them connected to what he called spiritual geography. And at the end, he listed a number of very nice ideas, which I do hope to get to. And at the end, he said something very interesting, and that paved the way for this first class. And he said, well, we just finished a whole year of Seasons of the Soul, which dealt with time. So maybe now it's time to deal with space. So that really struck a chord with me. And so we're going to start this class talking about time and space according to Kabbalah and Chassidut. And then, whether it's this week or next week, we are going to take that and apply it to the land of Israel, to Eretz Yisrael. And of course, Eretz Yisrael's relationship with the rest of the world. But I thought that was just a very good idea, not just because we learned Seasons of the Soul all year, but because the holidays of Tishrei and Elul is very time related. In other words, it's a new year. And then we had the 10 days of Tshuva, and then the 7 days of Sukkot, and then Shmini Atzeret. But it was very time related. But in a minute, we're going to connect it to Sukkot, because it's hard to believe, but only 8-9 days ago, we were still living in Sukkot. It seems like years ago at this point, but it was only 1 week ago was Simchas Torah. And for those in Chutzor, it was Shmini Atzeret. So we're going to start with this idea of time and space, especially because we just finished the Parsha of Bereshit. And the Ramban, so he asked, in a sense, well, what was created in the beginning? Bereshit. What difference was there before Bereshit and after Bereshit? And he answers that the initial creation was of time and space. because before creation, even though it's very, very hard for us to get our minds around an infinite reality that is beyond time and space, I believe everyone watching has had moments where it feels like beyond time and space. And those are very real experiences. But here we're talking about that there is no world, there is no space the way we think of it, and there was no time the way we think of it. So the Ramban posits that Bereshit, right in the beginning, is the beginning of time and space as we know it, as we experience it. So I want to go back to Sukkot as a means of drawing us into the idea of time and space, according to science and according to Chassidut and Kabbalah. So we all know that Sukkot, we shook the lulav to 6 directions. And these are the 6 directions of space, even though many times we think of the 4 cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west. But when we shook the lulav, of course, we included above and below. And so in a sense, all of space is an expanding cube. All of space is 6-sided. And so we shook to the 6 sides. One of the many, many kavanot is that it reminds us that God is everywhere, that all of space is filled with godliness, with divinity. But at the same time, we were dwelling in the sukkah for a specific amount of time, 7 days. So one of the ideas we're going to explore is that the 6 sides of space. Now, when we shook the lulav, each time we shook, we began by holding it here, and then we would shake and bring it back, and shake and bring it back. So we're in the middle of the cube. So we're surrounded by 6 sides. And so we can, in a sense, understand the unity of time and space through the Sukkot, is that we have the 6 sides of space, and we are the inner dimension. So this goes along with a concept that Rav Ginzburg teaches, is that the panemius of space is time. Now, how can we understand that? In a certain way, if you had space and no time, in a sense, nothing would move. Everything would be frozen in space, because it's the dimension of time which, in a sense, allows movement within space. And of course, we know that 100 years ago, so Albert Einstein unified the idea of time and space. Until then, in science and in just regular experience, we considered time and space as like apples and oranges. There were 2 like different things. Of course, they coexisted, but we didn't think of them as unified. So Brian Greene, in his book, The Elegant Universe, so he gave a really simple explanation of how to understand time as a dimension as real as space. and why Einstein called it the time-space continuum, because they were absolutely unified. So the example he gave was like this. Someone wants to meet a friend. So he says, I'll meet you at 43rd Street. So the friend's going to ask, well, which cross street? 43rd and 1st Avenue, or 2nd Avenue, or 3rd Avenue, or 4th Avenue? What's the cross street? So the person will answer 5th Avenue. So now we know it's at 5th Avenue and 43rd Street. And so the friend says, are you going to be outside or in a building? He says, oh, I'll be in my office. Well, what floor are you on? I know it's in 43rd and 5th Avenue, but like, what floor are you on? So the skyscraper could have 80, 90 floors. So he says 60th floor. So now we have the 3 dimensions of space. We have breadth, length, and height. But there's one thing missing. The friend will say, what time are we meeting? So without that, you could have the dimensions of space, but you're missing a major component, and that would be time. So along with this idea of the 6 sides of a sukkah and shaking to the 6 sides. So some of you might have this book. This is Rav Ginzburg's book, Living in Divine Space, Kabbalah and Meditation. And you can see on the cover a cube, because this is the archetypal image of space, is a cube. And in this book, it's an entire book on one meditation. He presents a meditation based on a cube, which I'll explain very quickly. And the person who is inside the cube, the one who is meditating, and he bases it on the idea given over in the Rambam and the Sefer Chinuch, that there are 6 continual mitzvot. There are 6 mitzvot that apply to every Jew at every time, in every place, and they're continual because they're all mental. They're all mental mitzvot. And in fact, it really applies to the whole world, to all of humanity. So what are the 6 mitzvot? Is the belief in one God and divine providence, that God is involved in the world. And that is the first of the 10 commandments. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. So that is the first of the continual mitzvot. The second is the second of the 10 commandments. Have no other gods before me. The third is the unity of God, the belief that God is one, not just that there is a God, but there's really one God, and that in a sense, all of existence is a extension of that oneness, and that's the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The fourth is the love of God, which comes right after the Shema. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. The fifth is the fear or awe of God, and that is in the book of Devarim, where God asks, what does God request from you other than to fear and have awe of him? And the sixth one is the third passage of the Shema that we say every day. Lo tatulu acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem, asher atem zonim achareihem. Don't go after your heart and your eyes that you go after. And this is called the not running after negativity. So these are the 6 mitzvot. Anyone could Google what are the 6 continual mitzvot in the Torah, or get this book, or go to the Galinai website and see what you can find about it. But the idea is that the meditation is thinking of these 6 mitzvot, but like a cube. And you're in the middle. You're in the middle, living in divine space. So of course, when we shake the lulav to the 6 directions, we can take this meditation and expand it to include not only the 6 continual mitzvot. Now remember, there is a 7th, and I didn't mention this, there's a 7th mitzvah that the sages say longs to be continual. And that is what's mentioned in the Gemara, that would it be that a person could pray the whole day long? Now, this isn't talking about standing with a sitter and praying from a book all day long. It's the idea of having a prayerful consciousness, to be in a constant state of connection to God and longing for God and speaking to God. So that is the middle of the 6. So it's just like shaking lulav. The middle is the prayer, and then it's to the 6th side. So these 7 really also connect to the ushpizim, to the special guests of Sukkot. And they, of course, connect to the 7 lower sfirot and the inner dimensions of the 7 lower sfirot. So all of this is just 9-10 days ago. We were still shaking lulav, but it has a lot to do with the concept of space. But like we mentioned about that, time is the panemius, is the inner dimension of space. So this is a very, very great kavana about the week, that the 6 days of creation, even though right now when we just read the account of creation, so there were 6 days of creation, and then Shabbat, the 7th day. So it's like a continual, like a more linear presentation of time and how the days of creation unfolded. But in a certain way, Shabbat is really the inner dimension of the 6 days of creation. So here we have something very, very important, is that, and we're going to get into this, is the letter Vav. The letter Vav is really key to understanding the unity of time and space, because the letter Vav numerically equals 6. So those are the 6 vortexes of space, the planes of space. But Vav means and. It's a connection. And the Torah has a very unique grammatical structure that we don't find anyplace else, is if you put the letter Vav before a verb that is written in the past, you translate it in the future. If you read it as in the future tense, and the opposite, if you put a Vav before a word that is in the future tense in the written Torah, you read it as if it's in the past. So the Vav has the power to connect time and even bring the future into the present and even into the past, and the past into the present and into the future. So time becomes very, very fluid. And so the Vav, of course, is one of the 4 letters of God's name. And it represents this unity of time and space. So now let's look at two of God's names and see their connection to time and space. So we'll take the cardinal name of God, the four-letter name of God, a Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. And everyone points out that these four letters is the construct for past, present, and future in Hebrew. Haya, Hoveh, Yiyeh. Like in Adon Olam. V'hu Haya, V'hu Hoveh, V'hu Yiyeh B'tifara. He was, he is, and he will be. So we can look at that literally, that God existed even before creation, of course. God exists in the present moment, and God will be existent forever. So past, present, and future. But it's brought down way before the 20th century, the idea that in a divine perspective, so past, present, and future are all happening simultaneously. That is something that is a real challenge for the human mind to understand, how past, present, and future can all be happening at the same time. But we know that when a entity of matter is hurled through space, and as it approaches the speed of light, so relatively to a entity at rest, time will slow down. And mystically, we're told that it can't happen, but if something could reach the speed of light, no time would pass. So Rav Ginzburg says that the most mystical ideas in the world right now are in quantum physics and physics. Because if you see a falling star, so what are we told? We're told we're seeing it spatially, but we're told that what we're actually seeing is something that happened millions or billions of years ago. We're not going to get into the age of the universe right now. That one I'm not going to touch right now. But we're seeing this star falling from a long time ago. But we're only seeing it now. Why? Because it took that long. And I saw on the chat, I think Nachum or someone pointed out that we measure space in light years. Why? Is because in E equals mc squared, the constant is light. That becomes the linchpin of understanding all of reality. But if the speed of light, we're actually told that Einstein came to some of his revelations because he had this constant, call it daydream, of what would it be like to be on a beam of light? Like, what happens to time and space that, what would you envision? What would the experience be? So in a certain sense, if a ray of light that we're seeing many, many, many years later, if you're on the light beam, no time has passed. We're counting in, they say certain galaxies are 350 million light years away, numbers that are really beyond our comprehension. So all of this is connected to the Vav. the Vav, and especially in God's name. So we have the name Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, and it's very connected to time because Haya, Hoveh, Iya. Now it's brought down, and this is actually brought down in the Tikkunei Zohar, that if you square the 4 letters of God's name, Yud equals 10, so 10 squared equals 100. Hey is 5, 5 squared is 25. Vav is 6, squared is 36. And another Hey, 5 squared is 25. If you add up 125 and 36 and 25, it equals 186, equals the word makom, space. And this is where we get the idea that one of the ways we refer to God is hamakom, the place. So this is connected to a famous Rashi that when Moshe is pleading for God to forgive the people after the golden calf, so a long dialogue, and God agrees. And now God is going to reveal to Moshe what are called the Shlosh Esrei Midot HaRachmim, the 13 aspects of compassion. But before, Moshe says, "Can I see your glory?" And God says, "No one can see my face. You could see from behind, but no one can see my face and live." So it says, this is in the text in the book, in the Parsha of Ki Tisa. It says that God took Moshe and he hid him in the cleft of the rock. And God said, "There is a place with me, and I will hide you in the rock when I pass by, and I declare the 13 aspects of compassion." So Rashi says about God saying there is a place with me. So he says, "Hu ha makom shel ha'olam, v'ha'olam eino makomo." He, meaning God, is the place of the world, but the world is not his place. So this obviously is a paradoxical puzzle of a statement. He is the place of the world, but the world is not his place. What this means at a deep level is that there are 2 aspects of godliness. One is called surrounding light or surrounding presence of God, which is really beyond time and space. And there's immanent presence of God that fills every moment of time and every point of space. And so this statement, he is the place of the world, but the world is not his place, encompasses both of those realities. Another way that it's referred to is mati v'lo mati. He's here, but he's not here. He's present, but he's not present. He's revealed, but he's hidden. All simultaneously, all at the same time. So that's one idea where we see in the name Yud Kei Vav Kei this unity of time and space. Now, this unity, Einstein, after his theories of relativity, so he wanted to reveal what he called the unified field theory. He wanted to reveal a formula similar to how E equals MC squared is it's not a simple, but it's a simplified formula for an enormous amount of knowledge and wisdom and energy. He wanted a formula that would bring the 4 forces of energy, 4 cardinal forces of the universe together, which are the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, electromagnetic electromagnetic force, and gravity. And he spent the rest of his life trying to find this formula. Science has unified 3 of the 4, but they have not figured out how to unify gravity with the other forces. Today, they call it the quest for the theory of everything. Now, this is so significant because what science is saying is we recognize that all matter, all of energy, all of existence is unified. There's a unification, even though we experience the world as plurality, but the bottom line, the foundations of existence, there's a unity. Now, we've had a unified field theory. It was not a theory, unified field formula for even before according to the oral tradition, even before the Torah was given, that Yaakov already knew the verse which we call the cardinal verse of faith in the Torah, Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. That is our unified field reality, that God is one and ultimately everything is connected. Not that we always understand how it's connected, that's for sure, but that we believe that everything is connected. So now I want to take just one other name of God, and also we're going to see a connection of time and space. And that is, we learned from the Ari, one of his kavanot for shaking lulav is the name Kel, Aleph and Lamed. And in English, we refer to divinity, we use the word God. And we know that in the Torah, in our tradition, there are many, many different names of God, each one revealing a different aspect. Of course, they're all unified. And the one that is the most generic that would be translated as God is this name, Aleph and Lamed. So this name equals 31. And so the Ari taught that when we would shake to the 6 directions, that we should be aware that God is in all of these directions. So if you take 31 times the 6 planes of space, it also equals makom, 186. 31 times 6 equals 186. So here's a second name of God that through numerology, through gematria, equals makom, space. But we have a pasuk that says chesed kel kol hayom. The loving kindness of God is all the day, is constant, is continual. So here we have the idea of this name of God manifested in time, a continual flow through time of his loving kindness, and the idea of space by multiplying Kel times 6. So one of the teachings from Rav Ginzburg is that in the book of Bereshit, it says that Avram at one point called on the name of God, Kel Olam. Usually it's translated as the God of the world. He called out to the God of the world. So Rav Ginzburg points out that grammatically, if you wanted to say the God of the world, you'd say Kel HaOlam, the God of the world. But that's not what it says. It says Kel Olam. And Rav Ginzburg explains this, the idea that we've been talking about is that every point of space and every moment of time is infused with divine energy. It could not exist without it. Nothing could exist. There's a point or a spark of God's light that allows everything to exist. So here we have Avram calling God is the world. The world is God. Now, this is not a pantheistic thing that is all that God is. God is a sum total of the world as we know it. That is more pantheistic. But this is just a recognition that God not only surrounds all worlds, but he is present, he's immanent in all worlds, in time and space. I'm going to end with one more idea here, and then as always, we will open it up to discussion. See a lot of chats there, we'll get to them. And this has to do with Yaakov's dream. Yaakov has a dream of a ladder that is firmly implanted in the earth, and its head reaches the heavens, and he sees angels going up and coming down, and God is at the top of the ladder. Okay, some of you might have my book, The Mystical Meaning of Dreams, where half the book comes to analyze this dream. I just want to point out a few things that have to do with our subject tonight of time and especially space. So in the story, the account of this dream, it's very significant that the word makom is mentioned 6 times. 6 different times it mentions that he was in this place. So obviously that's connected to the 6 planes of space. But what's significant is when Yaakov wakes up from his dream, so he says, I didn't know that God was in this place. Meaning, if I knew that God was in this place, I wouldn't have gone to sleep. I'd be like in awe that I'm in the presence of God. But it says in the Torah that that's what Yaakov says, that I didn't understand that God was in this place. But we understand that more as a part of his revelation and vision in this dream, and what was revealed to him was this idea that God encompasses all of space. Like sometimes we think that godliness or spirituality is like up here someplace or in the heart, and space and time is just the backdrop of what's happening. There's no intrinsic divinity in time and space. But here we the whole class is showing really the very opposite. But here we have Yaakov coming to this realization that God was in this place and I didn't know it. But now I know it. Now I know it. So along with this, as part of when God is speaking to Yaakov, so he reveals to him, I'll be with you, I will protect you, I will bring you back, and I will give this land to you and to all of your seed, all of your lineage. And one of the verses says, I will give you the land that you are lying on. So Rashi, you could take that literally, that God is saying, this is what I'm giving you, this few meters, that's your inheritance. So we know that that's not true because God says you will expand to all 4 directions. So Rashi says an amazing thing, a very amazing thing. He says God took all of Eretz Yisrael and he folded it up under Yaakov. So it's an amazing concept that, and not just where he's lying, It's as if all of Eretz Yisrael was underneath him. So this goes back to this concept that we mentioned from Rav Ginzburg, that in potential, all of space is in every point of space. And every moment is in each moment of time. So one way we can explain it, and it's getting a little bit late, so I'm going to need to shorten this somewhat. But the idea of, you take a seed, doesn't matter if it's a seed of a vegetable or a fruit tree, or I'll use the biggest image of a redwood. You have a seed of a redwood, you plant it in the ground, and you come back 100 years later, and it's like the tallest trees on the planet. But that tree that you're now looking up at in awe and amazement was all contained in that seed. It's the same thing with a human being. We come from a seed and an egg, and the entire DNA code of who we become, it's all there. So all of that space is in each seed. The biggest example is the idea of what's called the Big Bang, that an infinitely small speck, we'll call it matter. It's not even clear that that's the right terminology, but this tiny speck explodes, and the universe is still expanding at actually a phenomenal rate. And we're talking about tens of billions of galaxies, each one having tens of billions of stars. And we're told, I mean, this is it's a mystical idea, but we're told that this is how this universe began. It was all in we'll call it a seed. It actually says in the Gemara that at the beginning of creation, the world was no bigger than a mustard seed. Now, what this sage, how he knew that's revelation, that he would say such a thing, that the entire world was as big as a mustard seed. So this idea of God taking all of Eretz Yisrael and folding it up under Yaakov. So this is one of the secrets of space. We talk about what's called Kfitzat derech, of being able to leap through space or leap through time in a very short time, go a great distance. Many stories of the Baal Shem Tov. There's stories of Yaakov Avinu, who used to do Kfitzat derech, this jumping through time and space, when he would go to the yeshiva of Shem and Ever. So if you just look at the world today, the whole world now is in a state of Kfitzat derech. In other words, what 200 years ago, 300 years ago would have been a journey, let's say from Europe to Asia, could have taken months. You can now get in a plane and do the same thing in 6, 7, 8 hours. It used to be if you sent a letter in the mail, snail mail, it could take weeks. In the old days, it could take months. Now it's instantaneous. And it's all in the palm of our hands, instantaneous. So this idea that all of space in potential is in every point in space, and all of time is potentially in every moment of time, is being actualized in the world. And according to many, this is part and the introduction and part of the process of the Messianic era. That what we're going through, these enormous changes in our perception of time and space, is being actualized. It's not like a theoretical intellectual discussions. Our reality is based, the economy of the entire world is based on this. Our communication is based on this. Our travel is based on this. So we're living in incredible times where our discussion of time and space it's very real. It's how we live now. And this is just the beginning. These are what are called the footsteps of Mashiach. So there's much more to be said. What we're going to do, though, as I said in the beginning, we're going to start taking some of these ideas and we are going to apply it to understanding the holiness of Eretz Yisrael, the holiness of the space of Eretz Yisrael and its relationship with the world. We will get to that. I'm going to end with a bracha that as we start the new year, that we use our time wisely. We have quality time. We make our time quality time. And that we take the spaces that we live and work in and fill it with godliness, making it special, like we do on Shabbos. Shabbos is a temple in time, but we also make our houses. We dress in the best clothes, we serve the best food, we set the table in the most beautiful way. We take Shabbos and space, time and space, and we put them together. And this will lead us into the ideas of the temple as well.